radio when he was only 17. So we're not going to ask him how long he's been writing since then. And his book, Were Mama's Tears in Vain, which we heard a little bit of at a point before, is his first book, and he's promised many more. Welcome, Dr. Byron Cox.
Thank you very, very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here and to see so many people and from across the Caribbean. I mean, what we have here today is a representation of the struggle that has gone back hundreds of years. As you know, the so-called discoverer came to our region in 1492. Just to tell you that when he came, in the Dominican Republic alone, within 50 years, they had killed more than half of the population of that island. Hispaniola, that is, which is now Dominican Republic and Haiti. And they had killed in less than 50 years, half of the population. As we know, the Europeans, please don't misunderstand that this is not an issue of race or color, this is an issue of history, fact, and above all, the people that has prevailed against so much. In the Americas alone, if you look at the figures, the Europeans killed in less than 200 years, 121 million people. Okay, in places like Mexico and so on, the main cities there were bigger than any cities in any part of Europe. What I'm trying to say is this, that we have to appreciate that what you're looking at, people you're looking at, so people who today was beaten on the anvil of a terrible history that has brought us here today. I think I'd like to go back to Stalin before I say anything else. Stalin in 1979 won for the first time the Calypso monarchy in Trinidad and Tobago. And the song he won it with was a song called Caribbean Man. I don't know if you ever listened to that song. And if you haven't, you should really listen to it, right? And I'll just quote a few words from the first stanza of that song and from the last one. In the first stanza, he says this: you start up a federation, the whole thing in confusion. CARICOM and then CARIFTA, but somehow a smelling disaster. Mr. West Indian politician, you say you've been to big institution, and how come you can't unite 7 million? Well, with a West Indian unity, I know it's very easy. If you only rap to your people and tell them like me, we are one race from the same place that took the same trip on the same ship. So we must push one common intention for a better life in the region. For we women, for we children, that must be the ambition of the Caribbean man. The last stanza says this, and I'm glad Miss Ayana Young is to introduce me because she has dreadlocks. He says this: the Federation done dead and CARIFTA going to bed, but check out the Rastafarians spreading through the Caribbean. If you have Rastas now in Grenada, and if you have Rastas now in St. Lucia, but to run CARIFTA, man, you get in pressure. Well, if the Rastafari movement spreading and CARIFTA dying slow, it is something them Rastas got, which the politician don't know, which is one race from the same place and so on and so forth. And you should really listen to that. Now, I began there to say this, that I have always perceived the Caribbean as one place. Whether you like this or not, the fact is we all came from a place called Africa. Some was dropped off in St. Lucia, some was dropped off in Jamaica, some was dropped off in Grenada, and my father dropped me off in a place called Carriacou, right? It's a little island of Grenada. Yes. You know, that's where they dropped him off, right? So the point is this whole thing that I am Jamaican or I am Vincentian or I am Barbadian, I'm only that, is a nonsensical, foolish notion. And we have to accept that. And the idea that one of us, for example, Barbados, could build an island of prosperity in an ocean of desperation is nonsense. And we have to understand that. And so what I'm trying to say here is this, that even though these are migration stories, they are migration stories because what? We began somewhere. We move from somewhere to somewhere else. And that place where we move from is what? Home, the Caribbean. St. Vincent has a great poet. I don't know if you ever heard of him. They call him Shaking, right? He was a jazz musician. And he has a poem, Coming Home to Us. And this is what Miss Worm Miss Young, and those who have organized this has asked us to do today, to come home to us, to talk about us, to say what the experiences were for us. I left the Caribbean as a student. I went to Europe first to study as a student. I spent 10 years, finally with a PhD, and came back home. And you might not believe this, but the truth is, the day they give me my degree, my PhD, I took my PhD from the Academy of Science and went straight to the airport. They had to stop the plane to wait for me. No clothes, no nothing. You know, and my friends asked me, so what about all your clothes and so on? I said, this is what I came for. And I'm going back home. I came here for this because this belonged to them. This was built upon them. The point I'm trying to make is this, that those of us who have migrated and those who have gone, those of us who went abroad and did whatever we did, it was because it was built on something. It was built on these people here. I want to tell you a little personal story. Most people don't know this. A member of my family, I wouldn't say who because whatever. But the grandfather, the great-grandfather was a born slave. And that slave, after he was freed, worked hard enough to buy a piece of land. And his son wanted to study law. He sold that piece of land so that the son could go to England to get a law degree. The son got the law degree, but the point was that while he was in England, the money ran out before the first year. So he sold fish in a fish market for the rest of the time he was there. And he only had one dream when he finished his degree. He only wanted to buy one thing. I suppose you guess what it was, a piece of land. He bought back the farm that his father had sold. The point is this, what we have to say to our people and to tell our people, that those of us who've gone abroad, we went abroad with you in our hearts. You sent us abroad so that we could bring back, something which has three elements in it. Something that they took from us, right? Probably it's the wealth, probably it's the education, but something that they took from us. That's the first. But we also had to bring back something else. We had to go out there so that we could see us not only through us, but through their eyes. Because there's always a mirror image in everything that we do. But we had to go out there because we had to come home. If we didn't go out there, we couldn't come home to ourselves. Lastly, I want to say this, that as a people, Caribbean people, we must never forget that what we have done over the years is to conquer the world in so many different ways through our migration. You could start with the West Indies 15 if you want. They went all over the world and beat the hell out of everybody else at one point. But that is not just that. You know, a lot of people don't know. Sir Arthur Lewis was one of the first Black professors in many schools around the world in St. Lucia. Marley went abroad with his music and conquered the world. And we could name many more. Eric Williams did that as one of our premier first true intellectuals. And so many others. My point is this. We have always to understand that in migration, even though we are a Caribbean people, we are part of the world. We cannot isolate ourselves from the world. But in being part of that world, we must never lose ourselves. We must always come home to ourselves. And coming home to ourselves does not mean coming home to Barbados or to St. Lucia or to Grenada. It means coming home to us as a people. People who have struggled so much. People who have suffered so much. The people who have prevailed against all odds in this world. Against all our history. And so the migration stories that we tell, when we went to England, we went there to clean hospitals and so on. You know. That is what we went there to do, you know. And when many of us went to the States, we went there to do menial jobs and so on, many of us, right? And that migration story tells us that at home, and abroad. Wherever we are, we have been able to remain. So this exercise today is an exercise that has many elements to it. But I think the most fundamental element is that the migration story is not a Barbadian story. It is not a St. Lucian story. It is not a Vincentian story. It is a Caribbean story. It belongs to all of us. And it is a story which says that we are ourselves, but we have contributed so much to the world. And it's through that migration that we were able to do that. In other words, migration in and of itself has allowed us to be who we are and has allowed us to contribute much more to the world and has allowed us to realize ourselves much better than if we didn't migrate. But that migration must never mean that we have lost ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Byron Cox. The migration stories are our Caribbean stories. And just to tell you about some of the comments that are posted, one people, one Caribbean, serious things, preach, talk your truth, right on, speak it, brother. Thank you, Dr. Cox. Migrate ourselves, so moving. You know, I've been to paradise, but I've never been to me. And the comments goes on and on. And if you'd like to hear any more from Dr. Cox, we invite him to post his contact details in the chat. And so persons can connect and hear some more of your migration stories, which are our stories, because you did it for us. We thank you. And just to let you know that we are so very proud of all that you have accomplished as you migrated and returned home.